Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Next Man Up podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Crowley. I'm here with my co-host, Colin Martin.
How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah, well, we'll see how good you actually are. Speaking of that, I mean, we might as well just address the elephant in the room. There's not very much to talk about in the other sports. Not really much going on in the NFL or any of the college sports right now. So probably just going to talk about the Celtics ending, and then we can preview the finals a little bit. This will come out the day of game one. So, especially with all the traveling and everything going on, we'll probably only be able to talk about two games of the series at a time. So, be able to kind of go in depth about it. But for now, we can talk about the Celtics versus the Heat. And the Celtics are just another number. 0 and 151 now. Teams not able to come back down 3-0. If you look at history, you would be able to see that this wasn't going to happen because that's what history says. But, the Heat gave them 3 games. They said, don't give us one. They're like, we'll give you 3. So, and then just blew them out of the water in game 7. I don't know if anyone played well besides Derek White, who decided to be a very good player in the second half, but no one else was good. Rob Will was doing something. I guess he was throwing up. Jason Tatum rolled his ankle. So I don't know what other excuses will come out, but you can say whatever you want about them. I think I know where this is going to start though.
Yeah, and I'm not doing good. I'm doing horrible. If you guys have watched any of the other episodes, you know where this is going to start. It's not going to start with Jason Tatum, who, of course, rolls his ankle first play. It's not the reason the Celtics lost. The Celtics lost because they went down 3-0, but it doesn't help anything. And then, I feel bad for Rob. He didn't even look like looking back on it with that knowledge now, he didn't look like he was doing great. But yeah, we're gonna do the thing. We're gonna talk about Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown, and I hate doing this because I'm a fan of his. I have this guy's jersey, and I'm talking all this smack about him, but he was incredibly bad this whole series. It wasn't just like he was disappointing. Oh, like we expect more. He was horrible. Like, I don't understand why we're doing this now. He averaged 19 points a game as this guy that I've been told all year is better than Jason Tatum. 6 rebounds, 3 assists. That's not that bad, but when you shoot 42% from the field to do that, and you average 4 turnovers a game, I don't know what I'm watching. This guy, he looked nervous with the ball in his hands every play. And we talk about, the guys that stepped up late in the game for the Celtics to make this a 3-3 series instead of a full sweep. It wasn't Jaylen Brown. It was Jason Tatum getting buckets late, and then obviously like heroics from Derek White. We saw even big plays from Al Horford in game 6, stuff like that. Jaylen Brown was not even all there. And when this is a season when all year we've been talking about, if the Celtics don't win, Jaylen Brown will go. That's not like it made it seem like a thing where the Celtics really need to keep Jaylen Brown, but maybe he'll want to leave. Now it's up for debate. Is he going to be worth the supermax contract? Can you realistically play Jaylen Brown $300 million a year when he plays like this? I'm going to keep going. I'm like pretty mad about this. 8 turnovers in game 7 is the second most turnovers in a playoff game ever. It would be the first if Donovan Mitchell didn't have 9 turnovers a couple years ago in the first round. So for a game 7, it's far and away the most turnovers ever. I think it's the first and like the most since 1980. And we're talking about how efficiently he shot, which wasn't at all. His shooting numbers in this series were equivalent to Daniel House Jr.'s efficiency throughout the entire regular season. Banning, you're a Sixers fan. You don't want a guy to shoot like Daniel House Jr. It's unbelievable, and I'm just super disappointed in this team. I need to cool off a little bit. We'll kick it back to you, but Jaylen Brown was one of the main reasons the Celtics team disappointed and failed my expectations.
Yeah. I'll bring up the other guy. We can talk about Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
I know he rolled his ankle in the first play of the game, but he played the rest of the game. And if you continue to play the game, there's no excuse. If you go out, it's completely different. But if you keep playing, there's no excuse. And obviously, Jaylen Brown did not play good to keep it light, like you said. But Jason Tatum scoring 14 points in this game. Last year, scored 13 points in the elimination game against the Warriors. He obviously had the 51-point game 7 that we saw against the Sixers, but besides that, I mean, if we look through his elimination games, this year he was pretty decent before this game, obviously, but in the past, I mean, he's all right, and he's had some good games, but the inconsistency with him, I mean, I've talked about it a million times. You don't know what you're going to get from Jason Tatum night in and night out, and especially going into this game, they were going to need Game 7 Jason Tatum, but they clearly didn't get the one that they got from last series. He was bad. I mean, Derek White, pretty much the only guy that looked like he wanted to play basketball on the team last night. No one else really wanted to do anything at all. And from the Heat side too, I mean, we're talking about a lot of players that we've said it every single time, guys that were undrafted, guys who were late round picks, all stepping up when they needed to. Caleb Martin, who only lost the MVP vote by 1 vote. I'll talk about that a little more too. I think some people were upset about that, how well he played. But Jimmy Butler was the leading scorer in 5 out of 7 games too. It's not because his name's Jimmy Butler. Obviously, Caleb Martin played well too. The second best player on that team this whole series. But Jimmy Butler dropped 28 in this game. He was just insane this whole series. So I don't think I mean, it was obviously close, but the narrative that he didn't deserve it is not really fair to him. But obviously with Caleb Martin playing out of his mind, just not being able to miss from 3 pretty much this whole series, that helped them too. Gabe Vincent and Max Strus too, coming off the bench. Duncan Robinson, who almost won the game in Game 6, comes out, has a good performance in this game too. Bam Adebayo, though, if we're talking about players who are terrible, Bam Adebayo is one of the worst players that I feel like I've ever seen. This guy being in the discussion for what I would say people argue. I've seen people argue for him being a top 5 center. Like, I don't think that's really out there. I think it personally is, but people say that all the time. He does the same exact thing every time. And he's so predictable, like Pascal Siakam, but it seems like teams can stop Bam Adebayo every time he does it, and Pascal gets by and is actually a decent player. But Bam Adebayo just does a spin move and does his baby hook every single time and misses it. He's completely terrible. And if the Heat want to win, this reminds me a lot of the Suns in the playoffs a few years ago. Obviously, Devin Booker was out there and Chris Paul were out there playing, but especially if you're going to have Bam Adebayo out there against Jokic, he'll be able to play defense. He's not a bad defensive player, but he's going to need to score on offense. The 3-pointers are going to come and go like we saw in this series. The shooters kind of got cold, which kind of led the Celtics to being able to get 3 games back. But overall, if Bam Adebayo plays like this in the majority of the games, the Heat have no chance. The rest of the team can play as well as they want to, but Bam essentially is the second guy on this team. Obviously, Caleb Martin's been playing well, but it's not really designed for Caleb Martin. He's just shined a lot in the playoffs. So if Bam Adebayo doesn't play well, this series is not going to look good for the Heat.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. One thing we saw in this series, and I'll give credit to the Heat absolutely, is the difference between the Heat and the Celtics is that the Heat had more depth. And it's not even that they could play more guys, it's that the guys that were available were much better. I mean, the Celtics didn't even play Grant Williams all playoffs, basically. And then they got kind of forced to have him as that 6th, 7th man off the bench when Brogdon got hurt and we were getting inconsistent play from some of these other guys. I mean, the Celtics realistically can't play Pritchard, Sam Hauser, Blake Griffin, Cornette. Those guys can't play. The Heat have guys off the bench where, Kyle Lowry / Gabe Vincent, whichever one starts. Same with Kevin Love once Caleb Martin started playing so good and they couldn't bench him. Haywood Highsmith was awesome. We saw some good play from Duncan Robinson off the bench, even when he started or came off the bench. It doesn't matter. They had these guys that were able to contribute right away. And that's something to say about Coach Spo. I mean, the difference between a guy like Mazzulla and Spo, obviously there's a lot, but I think the one we saw the most this series is that Spo coaches the guys up where they could sit the whole end of the season and still be contributors right away. In the Celtic system, we have guys that have been starting the whole year and aren't even ready for Game 7. It's just a big difference. It's not a big difference in talent. I mean, the Celtics were the more talented team. It's a big difference in, preparation and being coached up. And it takes a lot for a team to blow a 3-0 lead, go into Game 7 and smack the other team to clutch things up. I mean, that's something to be said about the system they have around them, because that would have been the easiest game for the Heat to mess up. They had no momentum. They were on the road and they just came out firing. And you got to respect them for that. It brings the question, what are the Celtics going to do in the offseason? Because clearly you got to find more stuff to do on the bench. I mean, if you don't move on from Jaylen Brown, which I honestly don't think they'll do at this point, you have to do something on the bench. If you want to, I see people saying that Marcus Smart can't be the starting point guard on this team just for playmaking reasons. At that point, start Brogdon. Smart can play the two. You figure it out. You get Derek White some minutes. You got to get a better big man rotation. Al Horford is too old to play full games in the playoffs. Rob Williams is too injury prone to play full games in the playoffs. And there's not another Celtics big man that deserves minutes. So that's going to be one of the Celtics' biggest priorities. If you can get a guy like Zubac or, any of those rotational centers that I think would fit well with this team, it would be a really big deal. But the problem is now the Celtics are out, and that's something to look forward to next season. The Heat are still in it. And, going up against this Nuggets team, I think we share a similar sentiment where the Nuggets have guys like Bruce Brown and, Jeff Green that contribute so well off the bench, and so do the Heat. So, I mean, I'm going to kick it to you to talk more about the matchup specifically. But if we talk about depth and guys that are ready to compete off the bench, the Heat and the Nuggets are probably the two best teams I have in that.
Yeah, and that's why they're in the finals right now. One guy, especially that we've talked about every single episode, is Bruce Brown, who just continues to play well off the bench for the Nuggets. But we've definitely seen a lot of games from the Nuggets where the starters have played really well and Bruce Brown played well, but there wasn't really much going on besides that. So if Bruce Brown has a bad game, I mean, you're going to have other players step up. And it's the same thing with the Heat too. When you have that many guys who can play well, they're not all going to play well at once. You're going to get some guys that play well one game and then kind of off another game, like we saw with Duncan Robinson. He's going to go out there and shoot threes, and depending on the night, he's either going to make them all or he might miss them all. You never know. And going into this matchup, Jimmy Butler, we're all looking at Jimmy Butler versus Jokic, but obviously, like we talked about, there's guys, Bam Adebayo, Caleb Martin. If he can continue to be hot, it's going to provide problems too. And these teams, I would say overall, if I looked at this at the start of the season and you told me that both of these teams were going to be in the championship, if you look at this, even based off of the last 4 games of the series where we saw the Heat almost blow a 3-0 lead to the Celtics, you would say that the Nuggets should just absolutely wipe the floor with them. But I mean, if you count out Jimmy Butler at any point in these playoffs, and I have every single series, I didn't think they would win a single series. I didn't even think they were going to come out of the play-in. So I don't know if I can really bet against Jimmy Butler in this scenario. But I do think the Nuggets are the better team overall. I thought the Celtics were the better team overall. I thought the Bucks were the better team overall. The Knicks was kind of close. I wasn't a huge fan of the Knicks this year. But besides that, I mean, the Heat have gone through a gauntlet in the East. When we made our brackets too, we were looking, basically it would end up being the Sixers and the Celtics. Whoever made it out of that would end up playing the Bucks in the conference finals. But the Heat took an even harder turn and just beat the Bucks in round 1, and then had the Knicks, who they went more games against the Knicks than the Bucks. I don't know what that wants to tell you, but and then they go in a 5-game series, 6-game series, and 7-game series. So they've gone through all of this. They've gone through the gauntlet, and we just have to see how much Jimmy Butler has left. It seems like he did take a little step back in the past few games. You could tell that obviously he wasn't as energized as he was in the start of the series, but now with 3 or 4 days off in between games, I wouldn't be too worried about that overall. And what we know from Jimmy Butler and this whole team overall, Jimmy Butler is an amazing leader. And if they end up getting swept, they're going to give everything they have. So we'll just have to see if sometimes your best isn't enough, but the Heat are going to give their best in every single game, every single play. So we'll have to see what happens with this series. I think as of right now, if I had to make a prediction, I'd like to see the Heat win. I think realistically, though, I would say the Nuggets win in 6. I think the Heat could definitely push them. But I wouldn't count Jimmy Butler out in this series. I think it would be great to see the whole, I mean, this would be probably the greatest ring of all time. We've talked about that before. But overall, I think if I had to make an official prediction, I would say Nuggets in 6, but I hope Jimmy Butler can go out there and get a ring and cement himself.
Yeah, and I respect that a lot. You never can trust Jimmy Butler out, and count Jimmy Butler out, and we haven't had trust in him the whole time. But now I think we both acknowledge you got to respect him. I mean, just an incredible postseason. But what I will say about Denver, and I come on here and I'm the biggest Denver fanboy ever. I love to say good things about them, and I'm going to do it again. But they kind of had their own mini gauntlet, and that's weird to talk about as a one seed. Obviously, first round against Minnesota. Minnesota shouldn't have even been a playoff team. That was easy. But they took down probably the two biggest finals favorites outside of them in the West easily both times. I mean, with Phoenix and Los Angeles. Phoenix then went to 6 with a team that, obviously they were a lower seed than their talent would have shown just because of their, changes they made at the trade deadline. And they took down the Lakers with LeBron, who was on a mission. I mean, those were no easy teams for them to beat. I know they were the favorites. I know they were the one seeds, but I was very impressed with their run as well. And unlike the Heat, they're not like all tired now. You know what I'm saying? They've had to go through these difficult teams and these very difficult stretches, but they look fresh, and giving them a whole extra week while Miami's fighting in game 7 with Boston gives them more and more rest. I mean, if the Nuggets go out and win this final, I understand if the Heat win it, it's going to be an awesome Jimmy Butler story. But if the Nuggets win it, let's not count out that Jokic has had one of the best playoff runs ever. If he can cap that off with a ring and a finals MVP, finally we can cement his legacy instead of just being, like this guy that can't contribute in the playoffs, this regular season MVP award winner. Like, if he can do this, we're talking a way different story. And I think they will. I love, the Heat story. As much as it sucked to see him knock off the Celtics, I have a lot of respect for him, especially because I hate the Heat. I've always hated that team, but I have so much respect for the players they have. ESPN loves to talk about the undrafted storyline over and over again, but truly it is impressive, especially with guys, local to us. Duncan Robinson, like, that's an awesome story. But awesome stories sometimes only get you so far. And this Denver Nuggets team is the best team in the league. I've been saying this to, like people around us, and I think I mentioned it on the podcast before. Even if the Celtics made the finals, I was really worried. I really thought Denver had a good chance to knock them out. In our official predictions, I have the Celtics winning in 7, but I said over and over again, I think Denver could do it. I'm really scared. The Heat are just on paper a less talented team than the Celtics, and that doesn't mean anything because they beat them. But now we're in the finals and they're up against a whole new squad. This is the Denver team that has Jokic, who, as you mentioned, I don't think Bam can stop. They have Jamal Murray, who kind of outshines anyone the Heat have in their guard rotation. And Michael Porter Jr. has had a good postseason. Same with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Aaron Gordon might be the most underrated player on the team. I have so many nice things to say about Denver, and I just don't know if Miami can match up to them. My official prediction is Nuggets in 6, but I don't know, man. Like, I love the story of the Heat. I think it will be awesome to see an 8 seed win it all, but I think the Nuggets are a much different team than the Celtics are. I think it's going to be a much different story once we see them play prime time in the finals.
Yeah, I would say also another guy who could cement his legacy with this series overall, even making it here too, has definitely helped him. He's still a young guy too, but winning this, I think, puts Eric Spoelstra in the top 5 all time. If you look at the guys, obviously you put him up there with, you got Phil Jackson, I would say, Pop, probably put, I would say top 5 would be Pop, Phil Jackson, Pat Riley, Red Arbaugh, and then probably Spoelstra at 5. I mean, if they win the championship, I don't know.
I don't know about it's close, but like George Karl, Ritab Janovic. I mean, there's some names. If he can win this ring, yeah, now we're talking. I feel you on that. I'm gonna let you keep going, but there's some other guys up there.
I think I think he's already top 10. So I think with this ring, it puts him kind of on the edge. And this is a guy who's probably going to have 20 more years in his career. I mean, he's still young too. And with this ring, especially too, this being his 3rd ring overall, obviously one of the great, I mean, he was voted as a top 15 coach in the NBA a few years ago when they did the top 75 list. So I think with this ring, you could definitely make an argument for the top 5. I would say even right now, I'm not exactly sure where you would put him, probably top 10 with this run overall. Without the ring, I still think he's top 10, 60% career regular season percentage. I mean, going to the Eastern Conference Finals with all these teams too, running through the playoffs, it seems like almost every single year. And this ring would definitely help him too. Jimmy Butler, another interesting guy because we don't really know exactly where he would land as of right now without a ring. But if he gets one, he has a very interesting kind of place in NBA history too. And I mean, he's not done. He has a lot more years left in his tank too. I think he's 33-ish right now. So I'm sure he has 4 or 5 more years. And depending on what they do with this team, I mean, there's been rumors, especially if you win a championship or you even, I mean, they're in the finals now too. So you're in Miami, you'll be able to recruit free agents. They always have. There's always been the rumors of Giannis going there. You never know what's going to happen too. And especially with a team with Jimmy Butler at the helm, I would want to play with him, showing how great of a leader he is and playing with one of the greatest coaches of all time that we've seen. So this series overall, I mean, there's a lot of storylines going into this, and I don't think it's going to be easy for either team. I think both teams are going to have roadblocks, and I think they're both going to overcome things. So, I mean, with that being said, we're going to see a player cement himself as one of the greatest by the end of this series.
Yeah. And I'm going to bring it up again. I brought it up last episode, but there's going to be people on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, whatever you use. I mean, guys that are saying this isn't a good series because LeBron or Curry or the Celtics or the Bucks aren't in it, all that stuff. But this is going to be an incredibly well played basketball series. And as fans of basketball, I think we should be happy about it. And either way you look at it, as you mentioned, it's going to be awesome. I mean, Jimmy Butler could go out and lead an 8th seed to a ring. That is incredible. That would be talked about the rest of our lives. Or this could be the first stop in Jokic's career that, hey, at this rate, we're talking about the best players of all time if he continues this pace. I mean, this would be his first major achievement. We'd see some really cool guys on that Nuggets team that, may ride the bench, but like DeAndre Jordan will get a ring. Reggie Jackson, like there's some cool stories either way. So I'm excited for it. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to watch some podcasts on YouTube or TikTok. You're going to see some stuff where it's guys like us complaining that we're so bored that we don't get to see LeBron play. But I mean, at least in my book, this is going to be a really fun series. This is one of the best matchups we could have got. Pretty depressed that the Celtics couldn't pull it out, but end of the day, we're going to see good basketball. And it shocks me that some people are saying they're not even going to watch this. You're missing out on the best basketball of the year if you do.
Yeah, and I think all these games are going to be very well thought out. They're going to be grinded out games. I don't really see any of these kind of being massive like blowouts or very high scoring, just because both of these teams, especially with their coaches, they know how to make adjustments. I don't think we're going to see games like we saw with the Lakers and the Warriors. We're not going to see teams just have barrages from threes and just end up like 130 to 115. I think these are really going to be grinded out games like we saw with a lot of the Celtics and Heat games, especially in game 6. I mean, obviously that one came down to the very last play with time running out to Jimmy Butler had a chance to win it, made off 3 free throws. Marcus Smart takes the shot and then Derek White gets it in at the very last second. So I think all these games in this series are going to be great to watch. Hopefully there's no blowouts. Hopefully we get some really good basketball, and I think we will. By the end of this series, I mean, by the next time we talk, we'll probably be 2 games in. So it should be 2 games. It might be 3 games at that point, but we'll be able to see how the picture goes, even though in the last series we saw the Heat go up 3 and we thought it was over, but the Celtics fought back. So you never know what's going to happen, especially in this series. But going into Denver, I don't think Jimmy Butler and the Heat are going to back down, and I don't think the Nuggets are going to take them lightly. I think the Nuggets are going to take this very seriously, and I think the Heat aren't going to back down from anything.
Yeah, I completely agree. We're going to see some great basketball.
So with that being said, we'll see you guys next week, and we'll have a little bit more on this series overall to talk about, probably go more in depth on the games as we won't really have much more going on, but we'll see you then.
See you guys.